Sitting here meditating and pondering on the ways of the world today. Thinking of my people Africa and the state of the continent today. How mothers fed their children today. As granny goes down on her knees every day and prays. How many souls are dying from causes that could be prevented? If we did have leaders who cared for us today. Oh, 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 oh. Zion and Yahweh. Zion away. Zion away. Africa rise, young. Every 4 years, the politician say he's your servant today. And after you vote for them, they metamorphose into your masters. I say, have your say, we'll have our way, yeah. Not no strange, it's cow demon crosses. Meanwhile, souls are dying from causes that could be prevented. If we did have leaders who cared for us today. Oh, oh, oh. Zion and Yahweh. Zion away. Zion away. Africa rise.
We can be great again. World turbulence among the politics. Never hypocrite, lava. Never ever quit. Just a little bit longer. Victory is near. They're gonna disappear, go under. The leaders them no care, never tend to share. Babylon quit, the shedding of blood. Your heart a go suffer if you show no love. Stay away, righteousness. What we call the nation if we no righteousness?
1212 Radio Culture. Welcome to the bi-weekly lectures from the Rastafari Council of Ghana. Today's lecture is on the topic, the mystery miracle. Let me get it right. People. Prof. Imhotep Alanidede is delivering the lecture on the topic, the mystery, magic, and miracle of the plant people. Let's cross over to the Rastafari Council bi-weekly lectures organized by the Education Committee. Enjoy.
As a conceptual focus or locus to fill the ideological gaps that negatively impact cohesion and meaning.
fact, in most of the writings of our ancestors, they established quite clearly that the second exponent of the human kingdom is actually the plant kingdom. And such that you see the gaseous exchange, what I call, if you look at the physics of the basis of life, the proper diffusion of gases occurs between plant life and human life. For instance, during respiration, we tend to release carbon dioxide, CO2, into the atmosphere, which plants absorb through their stomata into use that as an input in their production process. So plants, through photosynthesis, converts this carbon dioxide and sunlight into glucose, which then oxygen. The oxygen is released back into the atmosphere, where it diffuses into human lungs during inhalation. So you see that there's an exact correspondence between our world and that of the plant world. Oxygen typically diffuses from areas of higher concentration in the atmosphere into the lower concentrations, especially around the human blood, while the carbon dioxide moves from higher concentrations into the atmosphere in the blood and in the blood. So when you check this dynamic exchange, it illustrates the mutual dependence of plants and humans, driven purely by physics. We don't even need to invoke spirituality to be able to explain this. And when you see this gaseous exchange, it also links directly to the carbon cycle, because when plants perform photosynthesis, they remove carbon dioxide from the air and incorporate it into organic compounds. And also, on the other hand, when animals and plants respire, they release this carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere, thereby completing the cycle. So the plant world is really a crucial area for us to study. There's a popular dictum that when the last tree dies, the last man dies. And this is actually not just a mere saying, but an actual fact that is embedded in real science that we can see. But there are several studies that have also shown that plants communicate with each other, and not just with each other, but also other forms of life and existences through chemical and electrical signals. If you actually look at the network of plant life through the root systems and even beyond, plants are able to communicate through the release of chemicals in the air, and then from their underground networks, you find this, what they call the mycelium network, through fungi, for instance. So actually, our understanding of the World Wide Web is really the connections that typically are formed with the plant kingdom. And the plants can communicate, can feed, and can transmit different kinds of information about hazard and impending danger, and how to protect each other within the ecology. Beyond this physical examination and explanation of plant life, we also know a plant typically can sing. They can perform all kinds of routines that humans also do. And in the indigenous traditions, certain types of plants have been involved in bridging the gaps between the physical world and the not so physical world, if you like, the unseen world. So we've seen in the case of plants such as ayahuasca and San Pedro in South America, which is very common, the plant for sacred journeys into the mysteries of life and the other dimensions that are not so common. In our own settings and background, there's a plant called humachem. I don't actually know the English name, but it is a vine and very common in most of the tropical West Africa, especially. It also has a lot of these mysteries around it in terms of its properties in traveling and making sacred journeys. And then also we have Iboga, typically very indigenous to Central and Southern Africa, but very common also in West Africa. You know, when you take all of these plants, there's a specific, chemical process that is involved that makes them do the kind of mysteries that they command. Iboga, for instance, contains the ibogaine alkaloid. And this cocktail of alkaloids that are loaded in Iboga, when you ingest it after a few minutes, it causes some anesthetic effects on the palate. And this can open the vistas into different dimensions that are typically not 3D. Simply because Iboga, when those alkaloids enter your system, it blocks the uptake of dopamine and serotonin. And these are two neurotransmitters that are associated with serotonin, for instance, for mood regulation, and dopamine that is normally associated with the brain reward systems. When these alkaloids block that, they actually, cease the normal operation of the human default system, and then opens the portals to several areas of exploration. Obviously, this has to be handled, under intense conditions of discipline and under the guidance of the sacred shamans who have been initiated into the art. We wrote an article on Iboga, especially that is also available freely. Those of you who are interested in looking at the details of that. It is true also with ayahuasca, which is a combination of two plants, the vines of the Banistropis capi and the Psychotria viridis. These two plants, when combined into the ayahuasca tea, they tend to produce two things. We have the DMT, which is the dimethyltryptamine, and the Hamala alkaloids. Now, you find DMT in most plants typically. In fact, the human body also produces DMT naturally. But there's a way in which one can increase the intake of that DMT in the human body and disrupt the normal functioning of the default system. And so when you have these, the Banistropis capi, for instance, have MAO inhibitors. These are enzymes that breaks down the neurotransmitters like the serotonin and dopamine. And when these enzymes are inhibited, the Hamala alkaloids allow the DMT into the bloodstream. And as soon as the bloodstream is crossed, the blood-brain barrier is crossed, you have this DMT bind into the serotonin receptors that is involved in mood regulation. When that happens, you have all kinds of visions and what in the literature they call hallucinations. But they are actually not hallucinations because the portals at that stage will be open to different dimensions for exploration. And that's what happens under many ayahuasca experiences. So many people report actually meeting beings of different dimensions and worlds, or intelligent creatures such as the ants, for instance. We normally don't consider that ants are very intelligent. We don't even see them in our environment. But under some of these conditions where the default mechanism has been suspended for some time and the portals open, and these other beings which we exist with, right here, right now, become very obvious and visible to us. But for you to get to that stage, normally it's an initiation. So all of these plans that I'm talking about are always done under intense religious guidance and training. And so they are not the type of plants that you can just take for what we call recreational purposes and etc. So you also find that plants are very, very important and inspirational in our conception of modern, drugs and pharmaceutical compounds. In the literature, they claim that it's only about 20 to 35%, but part of our research is showing that anywhere over 65% of modern medicines are all derived directly or indirectly from the plant kingdom. I mean, you'll find almost all our pharmaceutical compounds, whether it's the chemical itself that goes into it, or the covering that turns it into the product that is then, done through chemical processes to bring it about, derived from plants. In our hospitals, morphine is derived from the opium poppy. And this is one of the greatest tools used for pain management in the hospitals. It's true also for malaria treatment, quinine from the back of the chinchona tree. And most recently, we also saw a lot about the Artemisia plant, which has been very instrumental in the treatment of malaria. But there has been a lot of research on various strains of cannabis which have been targeting specific, cells in the HIV/AIDS patients and many cancers. This is very well grounded now in research scientifically. And so they claim by the Schedule 1 prescriptions that says that some of these plants like cannabis, ayahuasca, San Pedro, and iboga are harmful and therefore have no medicinal value, can easily be dismissed without further ado because the science is very clear. And of course, you have several other biochemical sophistication of plants that are commonly studied in most recent literature. So precisely, this is an area of research that is very, very important and interesting. And we are just getting into the beginning of it. And some of the findings are actually a little bit because our modern medical and healthcare system. And we understand that even what we are using as pharmaceutical compounds have been derivatives of the original compound, which are the plant beings. Then it gives us a whole new world into the medical field and the ideas of healing, health, and wellness. And in fact, it's not that this knowledge is new, it's just that we have forgotten. Because in the scriptures, it even says that you shall eat the fruits and use the leaves, the roots, the plants for your healing. This has been the motto or the mantra of our great healer and ancestor now, Dr. Sebi, when he brought up the idea of the African biomineral balance. His theory at the time was that basically when the human system is clogged, especially when we eat too much starch and too much blood, that's the way he put it, we clog the system. And when the system is clogged, almost any kind of disease condition can arise. So the first point in treatment is try to get the system open. So he had these powerful combinations of compounds, bromide, calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, iron, all of them loaded in one compound that you just take and then it will clean up the whole system. And when you clean up the whole system, the second stage is to restore it with the vital minerals and compounds and vitamins that are lacking in the system that allows diseases to fester. And that's how the biomineral balance through foods we eat from the plant kingdom, which are easily metabolized within our system, can help correct some of the disturbances that we have in our world today. So I have some of these plants which I've personally been very interested in studying all the time. I have them around me almost on a daily basis. And one of the first ones is the sunflower, which we know as one of the sacred flowers that we have in our system. Sunflower is noted for its beauty. I mean, the sheer beauty of this flower is such that when you come into a space with it, no matter your emotional state, you have to get brighter. I've always said this about the sunflower, that when you look at it and you are angry, your mood has to change. And that psychological effect of the sunflower as an environmental enhancer, enhancing the mood and the beauty of the environment, makes it a very important process in our journey as humans. In fact, the sunflower exhibits the property known as heliotropism. It's not just the sunflower, many other flowers have that quality where they track or follow the pattern or the direction of the sun. In fact, in the morning, especially when they are young, the young sunflowers are able to, you see all of them bend towards the east, rising with the rising sun. By noon, they will be pointing upwards. That's if you are actually in the tropics where almost daylight and night are about the same, just a slight variation. You find that in the West, by night or by evening, the sunflower will be pointing westwards. So this traveling or following or tracking of the sun, which is called the dance of the sun, is the heliotropism that we see throughout almost some of the plants in nature. The sunflower behavior in this form is also very related to what our ancestors have already said long time ago about the great goddess, the mother goddess of creation. When the sky mothers came down and left, they left a lot of anecdotes and myths and signs about their activity and role here. So the mother Nut or Nut in our ancient traditions is the woman that is stretched across the sky and her whole body is covered with stars.
Radio. Culture.
As a cosmic entity representing the sky being. So a whole body covering the entire earth is a representation of the exact being that this planet is, which is a feminine creature. Mother Nut is actually the son, the daughter of the sky god Shu, and she's also her mother is the goddess Tefnut that we know from our ancient records. So Nut will normally give birth to the sun, which we call Ra, as the sun god, and she swallows Ra in the evening, and then she births Ra in the morning. This cyclical behavior is studied very well in medicine, the circadian rhythms of life. It's also the rhythm of birth and death, of day and night. So the dualities are all represented in that. And it is the traveling of the sun from the east to the west each morning, renewing with the illumination in the east, and then by night it enters into the darkness. It was also the symbolism for the afterlife, that when we live here, there's another world, the underworld. That is where the darkness, what we don't see now, we call it the underworld. But that is another world or another realm that is imbued with beauty and lushness, where life exists. So this whole idea and mystery of the sunflower represented itself in a plant. It actually tells us precisely the principle of correspondence, as above, so below. So if we want to know the mysteries of the sun right here on the planet, we've got to look at this plant, which is right here with us, because this is the closest we can see. Of course, many sun gazers have seen the effects of trying to look at the sun in the daytime and the effects it will have on your eyes. But the direct representation is the sunflower. And beyond all these mystical properties, the sunflower is also loaded with minerals and vitamins that are very helpful for fighting and inflammations in the body. The seeds are very nutritious for food. And if you look at the cosmetic industry, the oil can be used for making all kinds of different, body products because of the texture of it. And we also know this is very healthy oil for cooking, because it's just coming directly from the plant world. In the poultry industry, sunflower seeds are nutritious food that the chicken and other poultry beings can depend on. So, as an agricultural alternative, especially in Ghana and other places where the number of plants that are cultivated are limited, sunflower becomes a very important alternative in our agricultural mix. They are also very drought resistant in nature because they can survive some of the drought conditions. Last year, for instance, many of the maize and corn plants failed in several areas because the rain didn't come in the quantities that we wanted. Most of this can be done by the sunflower as a substitute because it exists as both food for us and as medicine. And then you have what we call photoremediation, which is the properties of the sunflower to be able to absorb dangerous chemicals and toxins from the soils that have been depleted because of our extensive use of chemical fertilizers and other compounds that have turned some of our soils into almost barren lands that can no longer support a clear-cut organic life in many places. The sunflower can replace or replenish this in real time because it adds a lot of nutrition to the soil. It's actually a nitrogen fixer because when you plant sunflower, it fixes nitrogen into the soil, which is very, very important nutrient for a gas for the making of plant food and for the survival of the cells of the plants. It's also noted in Fibonacci sequence, which you finally can derive what we call the golden ratio. The number 1.618 is the golden ratio, which actually has been known to give us several expressions in nature. So the way the sunflower flower comes out follows an exact pattern of numbers. So Fibonacci saw this among the Arabs way back in the 4th century BC. It was rather the 4th century AD. When he came back from his visit in North Africa, he found that they had already discovered this, but he came back to write about it in the breeding of rabbits, and that became a number that you can generate, through different number generators. But what happens is you add 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, on and on. You generate that sequence up to a certain number. You cannot go beyond that. So that mean is what we call the golden ratio, which is the 1.618. We see the golden ratio in almost all areas of life. You find it in the way the sunflower blooms, comes out, in the way a tree branches, even in the formation of our hair, our fingers, our eyelashes and eyelids, and all the organs of the human body. It's really a very important and interesting mathematical feature that we observe in the plant world and in the animal and other worlds that we study. So really, the sunflower is an important plant and that deserves attention in our world of agriculture if we want to add some alternative crops and plants into the ones that we currently farm. Then we have the baobab tree, one of the culture ever to emerge on this planet. The baobab, we are very interested in this tree because it also has properties that gives us alternative thinking about industry and common businesses. So when you look at the baobab tree, it's one of the largest trees on the planet. In fact, in terms of longevity, we call it a tree of life because most accounts shows that the baobab tree can live up to about 5,000 years. But we know that this is up to millions of years. These baobab trees have been here millions and probably billions and trillions of years before we arrived. So the tree of life, really, with its big trunk, is able to hold large quantities of water. So in tropical areas, you find that this is a very resilient tree because it can take large amounts of water and store it for extended periods of time. So the baobab is not found just anywhere. It's found in some of the toughest terrains on the planet. But when you go to the Australian desert, where our indigenous people thrive, this is one of the commonest trees. It's the national tree of Madagascar. When you come to the northern part of Ghana and the middle belt of most of West Africa, in the Sahel and Savannah regions, this is where this tough human exists. And the baobab has many mysteries and myths and stories around it, but I call it theories. There are several explanations for the behavior and the stature of the baobab. For instance, most writings say that it's actually a tree that is turned upside down. So the roots are actually pointing upwards, whilst the leaves are pointing down. That's one particular feature that you see in some of the baobab configurations, particularly those you find very common in Madagascar and some parts of Australia. The African baobab looks more like the bulky, pulpy type giants in their own way. So some theoretical explanations for why the baobab is upturned, that is turned upside down, is that once upon a time, the baobab offended the gods, and therefore, for a punishment, she was given that posture. So the legend says that the baobab was once a very beautiful lady, more beautiful than all the trees in the world. But she became very boastful and proud about her beauty. And the gods were angered by that, because that is vanity. So they uprooted her and replanted her with her roots up in the air, her branches in the ground as punishment. I mean, this punishment was supposed to humble the baobab tree. And that is what has given this unique shape today. But we also find other kinds of theoretical explanations that says that the first baobab was simply an ordinary tree that stood proudly in the forest. But one day, the other trees grew jealous of its size and beauty. And the baobab, in response, tried to assert that she is the tallest and the most beautiful and most magnificent of all the trees in the forest. The trees, in retaliation, pulled the baobab from its roots and threw it to the ground. The baobab landed with its roots in the air and branches in the soil. And that's why we see this appearance. It's actually fascinating because the baobab is also noted to have regenerative powers. In fact, it is said that when a part of the baobab tree is scratched, it can heal without you seeing any scar. Over time, you see that place become as smooth as before. This regenerative ability of the baobab. Today, we see a lot of this research in stem cell, people trying to see whether the human cells can regenerate themselves. After the orthodox medicine people spent a lot of time covering a lot of this ancient knowledge, they are coming back to see how this connects with the human regenerative ability, the ability of the human body to go on and on. And there are some that are talking now about ageless bodies. These have been in existence for aeons before the appearance of the modern explanations. We also have the tamarind, which is a very sacred plant, one of the greatest plants on the planet, noted for its strong hardwood for timber, for roofing houses, and also for the leaves, which are very, very medicinal in many applications. The bark and the roots are all medicinal in their way. In fact, the focus for me is really in the seeds. Those pods, yellow, brown, as you see them, are really magical fruits, if I may say so. when you take these out and break them into out of their pods, you find this pulpy, almost astringent, tangy taste fruit. And that is where the flavor and the mystery lies, because this is arguably one of the most important ingredients in the food industry. In fact, when you look at the tamarind can be used for preserving different kinds of foods, and if it be added into foods, gives completely different tastes to the palate, and the nutritional value of this is also enormous because the compounds are loaded with vitamins and minerals. In fact, if you look at almost vitamin C in almost all the research that has been done so far, none contains as much as the tamarind fruit. And so we have turned this into something else, into an industry where we've created a whole new range of fruit drinks, or natural organic drinks, out of some of these very powerful trees that we have been studying. And that is the economic side of our work, is that we take the knowledge that is embedded in these plants and trees and let them show us their mystery and magic by transforming them into products for which we can then monetize. So we have an entity that is the Heart of Oceans Industries. It's located in the Bono East region. We produce these highly nutritious baobab and tamarind juices. And this has just taken off. And as part of the community that we belong, we want you to be aware of some of these alternatives that are coming into the market. Because when we did a study of the juice market, there are quite a number of these artificial flavors of tamarind out there, but there isn't anything that is currently as natural as we have managed to just take the pulp, transform it through mixture of other ingredients and herbs to turn it into a superfood that it really is. And this, although after going through the Food and Drugs Administration processes, they try to suppress some of the compounds through the thresholds that have to be allowed. But virtually, this is a life changer in terms of, just nutrition and balancing your diet and the minerals and vitamins that they provide. Both are now superfoods classified in the modern terms. And having this in your diet, as opposed to the carbonated drinks, actually provides a substitute for boosting your energy levels and boosting your concentration levels. One of our colleagues, who is also part of this enterprise, Dr. Peterson, also Jr., in fact, in the past 2 years, consistently at the University of Cape Coast, is sweeping all the research awards because this is the medium, a combination of these spicy drinks and heavily loaded compounds and boost the brain power and the memory bank and helps you to make connections fairly easily. And so this is part of the experiments that we are doing. And as colleagues and brothers in this Rastafari network, this is a business opportunity for those of you who are actually interested in, engaging for all of us to explore. Some of you may have other ideas of expanding this and taking it to the next level, and so on and so forth. That's where we are with this. I think I've been talking for quite a while now, so I'll probably just pause here so that brothers and sisters can come in and then we can reason together. But this is what I really wanted to share with the some of the themes on the plant people.
Radio, culture.
Yes, Prof. We have So,
Yes, sir.
we thank you very much. Yes, we thank you very much for the presentation. I trust we have all gained a lot. And some of us have questions, comments. So at this stage, we'll open the floor to take some of the questions and comments that we have. So if anybody is ready to give us...
We're still live on Radio Culture with the Rastafari Council of Ghana Education Committee bi-weekly lectures. Today's lecture is on the topic, the mystery, magic, and miracle of the plant people, delivered by Professor Imhotep Alanidede. It's question and answer time now. We're crossing back to the bi-weekly lecture.
Radio Culture.
Go ahead. Yeah, so Raz, if no one is coming yet, I would like to pose the first question.
Sure.
In listening to Doc, Prof, I think reference was made about Dr. Sebi and his biomineral, his quest for people to eat biomineral food, his ability to reverse diseases. So this led to a conversation where he discourages the eating of meat. But there is a conversation ongoing that it is not healthy for a man to stay without any animal-based food. So I wanted to know if the plant alone is enough for man maybe to gain all the nutrients required in living healthy or having a healthy meal. Is plants enough, or does man need animals necessarily? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. So when it comes to the subject of
Radio Culture
area, so normally our main position is that you eat what your body requires for the time that you have to eat. And now we have evolved as humans. And we started off as not eating anything at all, but depending on just the breath of life, and evolved from that place to eating and living on just fruits and nuts. And we evolved from that place to adding, animals to our diet. So the animals themselves don't object to us eating them because we have that karmic bond to, learn about each other's world. So eating certain types of animals let us to experience the animal world as much as the animal world also experiences us by being eaten. So that cycle of life is actually part of nature. When you go to the safari or you are in the wild, the lions are eating other creatures and the eagles. So that cycle of nature is there. We have herbivores. We have other kinds of, carnivores that exist. So the food equation, I think Dr. Sebi's point was that part of the problems we are having in our life in terms of sicknesses are coming from the food network. And therefore, we should be more careful with what we ingest, especially for Africans. He kept emphasizing that there is a food gene consistency. And the typical example he usually gives is, the monkey in the tropics eats a totally different food from the polar bear in the temperate regions. So I think that those are some of the lessons that he left for us. And not just about meat and, the comparison between meat and that of, plants, but just generally, what we grow in our environment is what we walk to eat. What we have within us is what we walk to eat. So when you look at the process of meat, I personally have no position on it. I think you should eat if you feel that your, vitamin intake, B6 and B12 Some people argue that you can't get them from anywhere other than meat. Maybe that is true for some people, but there are several other alternatives in other worlds and other plants that you can find that. So there are some people too that just generally need to eat meat because of the way we live. Even with the plants, some of them, the way we grow them, as I talk about, loss of chemicals, depleted soils. So the vitality of the plant itself is not enough to provide all the nutrition that you need to have a balanced life. That is why in our modern time, we cannot actually have a one-sided view about being extremely only vegetable-based or being meat and vegetable-based. I think for some people, for religious reasons and other persuasions, health-wise, some people are unable to break down meat, and so many other reasons. So we have to look at the context of this, eating and not eating meat as an individual journey, so that what is good for one person may not necessarily be good for another. And what is good for one person in one period may not also necessarily be good in another period. So we need to look at this in a very relative sense, and that would be my general position on that. The way our ancestors dealt with this issue was the honor and the respect that we give to all the other kingdoms. Now, when you even invoke the idea that killing animals is not good and it's lead to shedding of blood and etc., you see that same argument can be made. We just looked at the sunflower. She's barely alive. You can see her tracking, apart from when the disc gets bigger and then you don't see that tracking every day. But she's normally very alive. You see the movements and the activities. Taking the sunflower is akin to killing it, taking the seeds and almost every plant that we eat. The wood that we use for constructing our houses and the table that I'm sitting on and the chair are all bodies of the plants. So this is part of the process of life. And that is true for our relationship with the animal kingdom. So our ancestors understanding this type of relationship will therefore treat the animals with respect before they take the animal's life, continue their life. That is why in certain settings, they have to offer the animal as a sacred sacrifice so that the dying of the animal will be the continuation of the life that we have here. So in the indigenous setting, you find that the meat is very well respected, the way it is prepared, and the processes it goes through. And that nourishing is totally different from what we have now are the industrialized, commercialized meat production systems. The chicken is typically a very roaming and lovely and bubbly, creature. But if you see how modern chicken is kept, those of you who have read them before, in cages. So, and then in 6 weeks, you are selling them into the market. So we don't call that meat necessarily. And then these days, there are all kinds of substitutes that are coming in where, the taste is made to mimic meat, but it's not actually meat. Those are already in the market. So it is these aspects of the food industry, the over-commercialization, profit motive that drives people to insane levels, feed all kinds of creatures and genetically mutate them into the food system, injecting them with hormones on all kinds of drugs to increase size in order to increase profits, introducing, different DNA, RNA factors into the food system through the meat. I think that is where the debate really is. And when we say that don't eat meat, what kind of meat are we talking about? So all of these are considerations in the debate about, about eating or not eating meat. So from my point of view, you do it according to how your body wants. In my own way, there are times that my body just doesn't want meat. So I don't ingest meat. But there are times I feel like it. And if I want to, I have to eat meat that are personally cultivated. So my rabbits or my chicken or turkey must be produced by myself. I don't know how the one that is carried over 6,000, miles on the high seas over the last 6 months, it gets to the country and stays for another 6 months, and then transported to me in my village. I don't know how that was done. So this is really my few thoughts around the topic, my brother.
Great response. Great response, Prof. Can I go really quickly? Can I ask
Yes.
just a quick reaction? Thank you very much. And we are live on Radio Culture, by the way. Thank you very much. So my name is Jabeloved Kwesi Bako. Prof, great response to that. And my only reaction there is that unlike animals, with plants, when you take corn, for instance, when you harvest the corn and you eat it, and you put some in the ground or some fall off in the ground or whatever happens, that is actually the process of regenerating for that. Whereas with the animals, once you slaughter an animal, it's gone. It's not really replaceable in that sense like that. That's my only reaction to your submission there. But I have mine is actually a question though, and it's about the products that you spoke about. Is it just the tamarind, or do you have other products? And my part two of that question is, do you have advice on how, like, do you have advice for people on how to follow a health care plan that does not depend on these pharmaceuticals that we are not so sure about? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Culture. Illuminated, contributions. Your point on regeneration is really very critical to settling the whole debate. So I'm very pleased that you brought this up. And you can say that for many of the plants. Actually, just recently, I found that through grafting and several other techniques of bringing plants back to life, you can cut the branches of any plant and really plant it and have a different, behavior altogether. So the life continues with the plant, whereas in the animal world, we actually end it. So thank you so much for that. With regards to the products, yes, at the moment, we actually got approval for 3 different products. The soy milk, which we're going to do with our own soya bean that we grow in our own meta farms. And so that's how but we haven't launched that yet. The 2 that are currently in the market are the tamarind juice and the baobab. So we named the tamarind after our great mother, Kiaga. So we say Kiaga tamarind juice. And it comes in several flavors. I mean, we've changed the compositions of some of the compounds, the spices. Some are more chili-based, some are more ginger-based. And it's just to give us different flavors to the palate, and also targeting them specifically. In the latter part of this would be to have nutraceuticals, where we will load your bottle that you are drinking for pleasure with all kinds of minerals and vitamins that will target specific diseases. We haven't done that yet, although the research is already out. In fact, there are all kinds of ways of taking this, either as tinctures or just a normal fruit juice. But for now, these are the 2 in the market, and they are going on with our indigenous food chain, which is we started with the fast food because that's what the people are currently all going for. I mean, if you see the queues in KFC branches, and McDonald's hasn't got to Ghana yet, but in those places, people queuing for this food. We believe that to enter the market, you need to just get something that is similar to what is already there, so that people don't get too frightened about what is coming. But the end is to have a nutraceutical, and it could be just a simple, very highly concentrated bottle of it, which you buy for a few cedis. And that can supply all your nutritional needs for the day. And it can really be the solution to some of your medical and health conditions. Food that will also be our medicine. Let me just put it in Imhotep's terms as the indigenous formulated it. But if you are looking for specific information, I think this is meant to be just a reasoning. So if we want to know specific, kind of plans for specific conditions, we may be able to discuss some of those in a different ways. I didn't kind of touch much on that. But when you take specific plants like Mondiariti, for instance, this is a root plant. Mondiariti is also known as white ginger. If you find it in the Kakamega forest in Western Kenya, it's very common there, but it's also widely distributed in many, many places. When you take it out, it has that feature of a ginger and then also root-like. And so sometimes this needs to grow like about 8 years for you to be able to harvest. But what it's in Mondia is staggering because it is the root of many compounds that solve a lot of disease conditions. In Africa, the way they use it, and especially in modern parlance, people just think it's an aphrodisiac, which it is, because the moment you chew that root, you find it sold in the streets of Nairobi and several other places. But when you chew the root, it simply just stimulates those tiny vessels in your sexual organs and opens the pores out for more blood circulation, which can then create all kinds of pleasurable movements for you. But beyond that is that this is really a plant of multidimensional character because it can be used to treat several conditions in the human world. Because when your blood is freely flowing and oxygen is carried to the various parts of the cells to continue their activity, there's no condition called disease that can arise in those states. So unless you have particular, conditions that you want to talk about, we can discuss that. But I also want to emphasize that my role here is just teaching about these things, not necessarily in a medical advice or something like that. But if you want a more granular discussion, we can always take this up.
Yes, indeed, Prof. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that response. And we would engage you on Radio Culture to discuss that further. I hope you'll be available to do that. But for now, thank you very much for that response.
You're welcome, my brother.
Radio Culture.
Yes, give thanks. I want to come in here.
Yes, please.
You talk about the spiritual aspects of plants and the relationship that plants has with the human body. And you also emphasize the point that all the plants in the forest that we cultivate or, we just clear them, they all have importance. They all have the reason of, being part of this whole system of, living things. So I want to find out, why is it that when you take in certain plants or certain fruits or certain plant-based food, you get very bad reaction. But when another person takes the same thing, it doesn't, the person doesn't have any negative reaction. Is it that the spiritual connection between you and the plant is not corresponding, and that we need to choose plant-based food according to how it relates to us spiritually and how it works on us. That's number one. Number two, what would you say now to we farmers who we have to clear our fields before we plant? Are we not also causing devastation to another group of world, another group of living things? Are we not killing them? And if we are, what is the best way a farmer can live with the plants side by side without crossing each other's path? Thank you so much. I give thanks.
Well, give thanks, my brother. Give thanks. Thank you so much for those illuminating thoughts. Your first point on why certain people react differently to certain plants, and I think you also hinted at the answer, that we all have different vibrations to the different plants, and not just to the plants at specific points, but in different times. That typically, if you want to, let's take the plant that we all know very commonly within the Rastafari community, the cannabis plant. I mean, the original version of it is always a plant that lives in the fifth dimension. That is the beginning point of that plant. So actually, as I said sometimes in my research, the plant that we have right now is really not the ones that our indigenous fathers and mothers used. So this is a 3D thing. But yet, there is some level of goodness to it if we handle it responsibly. So, under certain conditions, when you take it, and in certain periods, when you ingest it, you will have different reactions. So, most often, in talking about these plants, we always say that you need to get the education before you approach them. So, in a lot of the traditional settings, there might be people who have used it several times, have studied its different reactions, the reactions of the human body under different conditions. And then they have documented that experience, and they can take somebody through an initiatory journey. Sometimes your body has to be at a certain level of vibration before you can approach these plants. So for instance, let's take your body existing mostly in this dense three-dimensional space. You involve in traffic daily in an 8 to 5 kind of paradigm, totally asleep to what is happening around. And then you suddenly get open to a plant that is vibrating at the fifth dimensional level. It's like you trying to pass through power through a medium that maybe you're taking about 100 volts, trying to pass it through a medium that can only hold 20 volts. You're going to, short circuit. And so some of these short circuit phenomena can, result in some types of hallucinations that people cannot handle. They may see things that they are unprepared to see, because the moment you cross the blood-brain barrier, you are open to dimensions that are not so rigid. So you will see that your hearing is the same as the instrument that you use to see. So you can use your ears to see, and you can use your eyes to smell. So all the senses, as we are using them right now, are within 5 degrees of freedom. That's the range. But there's so many permutations that can happen. But as soon as you block some of these signals that we are currently receiving, and you drop down the brainwave cycles into the alpha level, you will see that creative faculties begin to emerge that you don't see. And for most people, when you don't have the training and you begin to see beings and objects, like the table is not as you think it is. The chair that is standing, even the TV, it is not as fixed as it is. And when you see that a whole universe that is going on, there are planets that are rotating and revolving, and we ourselves are involved in that soup of exchange. And when you begin to see that you are not different from the water that you are taking in and the air that is empowering that process, it is a lot of information. So some people are not prepared to see it. And sometimes when you begin to see that everything that you have been told is upside down, sometimes it can be disturbing. So for most people, without the proper training, when they get into those dimensions, it can be very confusing. And sometimes they end up in the asylums, unfortunately. But also on this physical level, there are certain types of plants. In toxicology, we say the dose make the poison. Certain types of plants, when you take them at lower doses, they just can be medicinal, healing, soothing. But at certain medium to higher doses, they can be very damaging. For instance, cardiac glucosides, plants that are found within that range, we call plants such as Aconthera or Buffon. When you ingest them, they will block all the neuronal signal transductions pathways to the muscles. This can cause the muscles to relax immediately. And when they over-relax, your blood pressure can drop massively. And, excessive drop in blood pressure has a lot of effects on dizziness, on your mood, and it can lead to, diseases and, the blood becoming acidic and open to all kinds of diseases. So all of these are medical, effects of ingesting those drugs because they will have those physiological responses in our body. So it is therefore important for every plant, and including those that we are talking about here, for you to approach them, you need to understand, know the knowledge, how much of it is relevant for my needs, because Kwesi's body and my body are not the same. And Kwesi's mood at this period and my mood will not be the same. And then talking about that, it also comes down, if you take the cannabis plant, for instance, certain strains work on the cerebral system. So if you want to calm your mind, there are specific strains that target specific, neurotransmitters that bind with them and open the receptors in the brain for you to access alternate dimensions. There are other strains that target specifically the lower, energy centers. So for instance, when you take the indica strain, it tends to work at the lower energy centers, whilst the sativa strain will be working on the upper, cerebral centers. So all of these can produce different types of effects on the human body, depending on how you are wired. It is also true, the ruderalis is a combination of both the sativa and the indica strain. And those can give you a middle of the range response. But the thing is that when you open the two hemispheres so that the left is no longer functioning as in its own linear paradigm, and the non-linear paradigm of the right crosses over to the linear side, you find all kinds of expressions: beauty, art, music, love, divine expressions, and all of that. But if somebody's reality is this only reality that we have known, and you suddenly jump into that without any preparation, it can be staggering. So I would say that there's more research needed for all of us anytime we are approaching any plant, because it is the elemental of the plant that also does the job. There are elemental beings behind every plant. And those elementals, like our brother said, like we all live in human society, there are some of our brothers we don't get along with. You came from the same mother, same father, but you just do not get along. Some are wired that way. There are certain friends and neighbors we just don't get along. This is also true for the animal, the plant and the animal kingdoms. So there are certain plants that are not spiritually wired to our frequency and vibration level. So all of these tend to have effects if we insist on indulging in them. I take myself as an example. Anytime I take coffee after 3 p.m., I will not sleep. Way back in high school, when I wanted to pass and get a grades, coffee was my companion, because then it will open my eyes throughout the night and I don't have to sleep. But I want to sleep, so taking coffee may. Yeah. Sorry. Were you saying something?
No, somebody's mic went off. Please proceed.
Oh, okay. All right. So those are, so for some people, some of my colleagues tell me that by 12 o'clock, they may have their 3 cups of coffee. That doesn't work for me. Coffee is just a normal plant. If you also see the way our ancestors took coffee, it is not the way they have heavily processed and roasted it today. They took the coffee bean. The coffee bean was ingested. Similar to cocoa, how we take it today as Milo and all kinds of other, chocolates. These are now heavily processed and heavily reformed and refined. In our ancestors' world, they call cocoa food of the gods because you find all the compounds that you need: magnesium, copper, phosphorus, calcium. You see, so they also use the cocoa in higher amounts, so actually has more cannabinoids than cannabis. People don't even know that cocoa is a sacred plant that our ancestors used as a sacred journey to the other dimensions. But you must not mix it with the sugar and all the butter that they do with it. It's the pure cocoa, sacredly grown and harvested and performed under religious guidance. It's a sacred plant. But today we take it just like that. And some of the cocoa that we have been growing in the past 50 or so years are also hybridized, that we don't have the original cocoa. But if you see the original trees that are in Mampong, the ones that Tete Kwashi brought, and some of them are still around. If you go to the Kantanka network, they have preserved some of these original cocoa trees. They are sacred plants and teachers on this planet. So that's it for the first part. The bad trips and bad experiences is really dependent on how much knowledge we have. And therefore, I advise that before we approach plants, we should really give thought about why we are taking them and how we take them. Because certain plants in the forest, for instance, by ingesting it, you can die immediately. They just arrest your cardiac muscles and suspend breathing and paralysis. So please, this is a very important point to emphasize as a caution. The second point that our brother put across is that when clearing our fields through burning and other means, we do disturb the ecosystem. And I agree with him totally on this. If you see the devastation of the farms through bush burning, and not just plants. Last year, some guy set fire in our farm and it burnt all our, property. That's one part of it. And then the other part is that almost all the animal life that was there, the termites, the ants, and the kusie, if you like, the rats, and the snakes, all of that ecosystem is destroyed through the process of bush burning. Now, the one positive side of bush burning is that all those ashes actually are the beginning point from which new life begins to emerge, because the ashes is the basis of the potash that we use to form the fertilizers that are important in also adding the nutrition back to the soil. Also, the matter that is decomposed also turns into carbon that feeds back. So the cycle of life continues. But I agree that we have to be very careful and control these processes and find alternative ways. And the question is, are there alternative ways? The answer is yes. There is a way to live integratedly with nature in such a way that we don't disrupt it so much as we begin to do. Yes, there will be disturbance, but when that disequilibrium is very large, it tends to impact us very negatively. And that's what we begin to see with the carbon oxygen combination in the planet at the moment. In places typically like Accra, the oxygen concentration is so low because of the low tree cover. If you take places where the tree cover is large, we also have large amounts of oxygen. Radio culture in the stuff in the atmosphere, so that we can continue to live properly. So in the context of bush burning as farmers, I think we can control that. We can harvest some of the grasses. in a way that we can control the burning at one point, those grasses that we no longer need, because the grasses have a cycle of coming and going. So if we don't take care of that clearing in a responsible way, we cannot also plant. So it is that symbiotic relationship, that the respect that I'm giving to this clearing is that it will form the basis for the next growth and the next cycle. Okay? So that will be my response for now, my brother. And people are welcome to add to this, because the knowledge is not in one person's head.
Can I respectfully add to that? Can I respectfully add to that again, please, Prof?
Please, brother, go ahead.
Thank you so much. So speaking of the alternatives, right? I'm very fortunate to have been speaking with somebody who knows some of these things just recently. So it's very interesting that you brought up alternatives to bush burning, for instance, because apparently there's this practice, and I forget what it's called, sadly, but it's a practice that apparently exists among our people, where if they anticipate a dry year, they don't want to burn like they normally do. So what they will do is they will rather weed or they'll clear the land earlier than they would do normally, right? And apparently they also had their own way of anticipating what kind of weather it was going to be. So when they know that they will clear the land earlier, instead of burning, they will leave the cleared bush to stay on the land for an extended period. And this is why they weed earlier, so they can give the more time to decay and do all sorts of things. Apparently, that has the same effect as burning, but they would rather burn because it's easier, it's faster, and also, like you're saying, it provides that potash that they can quickly use. But if they feel like there is a need, and it comes in like how we have organic farming, for instance, these days people will be like, okay, let me use the easier route. But then when it comes down to it, you know that this is a route that you can take, and it's it's even better, So that's just a quick point that I wanted to add. But I also have a question for you, and I don't want to hog it, so I would prefer you take other questions, and then if there's more time, you can answer this one for me, please. You were speaking about the approaching plants properly and things like that. I've heard stories from hunters and farmers and things like that about plants that speak. Sometimes you try to touch them and they speak to you. They say, hey, Jaime, things like that. I've heard stories about plants like ahumachem, which apparently has a very spiritual, story to it, which some hunters believe actually travel in the night. They believe some of these trees actually physically uproot. And let me add that when I was a boy, I did see this for myself. I've seen this thing 2 times. The first time I saw an almond tree, I saw it in the morning on my way to school. It was on the ground. On my way back home, there were people flocking towards, this place. What's going on? They said the tree is back up. This was in Aguna Swedro. I ran there to myself and saw the tree. This I saw myself. It was on the ground in the morning. I went back there when everybody was going there. I saw it up myself. Second time, I was working in a TV station, and we got news that this had happened. So I did not see the tree when it was standing. But we got news that some tree that was standing, that had fallen, had apparently stood back up. And the natives confirmed that. So that gives me a very, there's an aspect of plants, trees, vegetation that we take for granted because we don't see with our physical eyes. After answering other questions, if you could please touch on that for me, I'll be very grateful. Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you so much, my brother. You make this conversation so lovely and interesting. So I think if somebody has a question, you can just put your hand up. So I'll be talking to that whilst I look up. If there's a question, I will respond to that. And my brother brought up these very interesting conversations. They are part of the things that I also discussed in the article. So I invite you to read it when he shares this with you. But some of these things, people put them in the area of paranormal behavior. And in our normal reality, they are not even admitted. There are several other stories that backs what our brother just shared. In fact, when they were constructing the Accra Tema motorway back in the 50s, it was said that there was a giant tree in the middle of the road. They tried to take it down several times. It didn't happen until they went to see the priest who was the custodian of the shrine of the area. He told them specifically why no machine can remove that tree from the place. So he gave them a few rituals and ceremonies to perform. And when they did it, they came back and they tried to pull it down with the caterpillars. They just says, no, just hang a simple tree and pull it, a simple rope and pull it away. And it was so easy to take the tree away from the place. Recently, at the construction of the part of the road from Kumasi to, Accra, when you pass Amasaman, going there, the construction was suspended for a few months for reasons that the road was passing through some shrines, and some of the beings that were living there had complained that they are not going to give way for the road to be constructed. So the Chinese actually had to go and do the rituals. These things are believed in almost all cultures, and it's some part of our experience. Last year, we were clearing our land, and I had given orders that certain trees should not be cut down, but I wasn't there. By the time we drove to the place, they had mowed down quite a number of trees, and I got a report that some of the trees said that they had not finished their business here, and we came to cut them down. So we saw the people who had sold the land actually came and stopped. Physically speaking, they stopped the construction. Now, they had said that there's a dispute over the land, and therefore we could not continue. Of course, there wasn't any dispute over the land. It was the way in which we were pulling down the trees, and several animals were, getting destroyed, because you see, one tree is actually a whole ecosystem for all kinds of people. That's right. The plants are living rooms for ants, colonies, for all kinds of birds, and rats and snakes, and so on and so forth. So just cutting down the tree, you have removed a whole world out of that place. And then there are certain plants that are actually favorite places for all other kinds of people. You see, when you go to the Congo forest, you meet the pygmies and see them with your naked eye. Today, some of those people, we call them motia and, short people who are shorter than us, because we have standardized the way a normal human being should be. When we see people who are extremely short, like a 2-year-old, but is like 1,000, he's living a 2-year-old body, but the wisdom is over 1,000 years old. We say those are motia. So some of them have left our reality. They inhabit big trees and in the forest. I spent part of my sabbatical in the Bupri forest in the Ashanti region. And, it was quite scary to do, but I stayed in the forest for 2 weeks. And in the night, the kind of dances and songs that you hear, in a place where there's nobody. So you ask yourself, where is all this coming from? So on the mystery side, I have heard these stories when I was a young boy of the tamarind tree, able to turn into a beautiful woman, go to market and shop and come back. So when we were children, there were all these stories circulating around. And even more recently, there is a mango right by, our farm in the village. This mango, when we were little children, we all climbed it, we ate from it. 3 years ago, when I went back home, it was ailing. And last year, it had completely dried up. But nobody is touching the wood there, because that mango has lots of mysteries to it. There are some trees in my village, when those they die, they have to dance the traditional war dance as they dance for any older person who lives an illustrious life and dies. So we do those ceremonies for them. So these are part of our journey. You mentioned Humachem, one of the trees that I have been very intrigued about. In fact, I saw it first time in the Bobri forest. Now this is a vine, a liana as they call it. She will climb the tall trees. So it's very difficult to see the leaves of this tree, this plant, but she's there in the forest. It is said that a young woman who crosses this tree, of course, if you know and you do it, you cease menstruating and probably not have children. These are some of the stories that I have heard. And so I spoke to the chief priestess who told me what happened to her brother who didn't follow the rituals of approaching this plant. Apparently, before you take it for certain purposes, ritualistic purposes, you have to offer something. Sometimes it's cowrie shells, it's a prayer, it's a drink before you can take it. And it is said that when you cut that tree and your shadow cast on it, you are likely murdering yourself. So we don't cut it early in the morning when your shadow, can be shown in any direction. Or when you are doing that, make sure your shadow is in the opposite direction. And then in the evening, same way. So that tree, the harvesting is done typically in the dark when there are no shadows. So all of these are different mysteries, and it's used in several, mystical works. So there are things that I learned as a student growing up, but normally with our Western training, we begin to look at this as some kind of, if you like, they will say pseudoscience, because our modern conception cannot explain these types of behaviors. So it is the elementals, the plants like us, like we sitting and talking right now. We have a body. That body, maybe it has 2 legs, 2 hands, etc., and a leg and a mouth, etc. We can move. The plants are typically stationary, but the elementals of the plants also move, travel across dimensions. And it is true that all manner of healing always happen through the medium of the plants. One of our great teachers, Samuel Anveyor, wrote a book about the elemental therapy, which is basically about the mystery of the plants. And he argues very strongly that you cannot actually be a healer without a knowledge of the plants. And so there are, in the indigenous settings, people who are initiated into the plant kingdom. So you understand the language of the plants. Certain times the plants talk. These days we can prove if you have certain types of speakers and electrical connections, you can really hear the vibrations and the songs that some of the plants are singing. And if you have a garden, you can see the symphony that is going on in the plant kingdom. And this is precisely some of the things that our great brother and ancestor, Robert Nesta Marley, was transmitting through the herb. Because the inspiration it gives you transcend the borders of the 3-dimensional reality that we find ourselves. And it leads you into a world of exploration where there are existence of beings that are as intelligent or more intelligent than us, but they have bodies that are not necessarily like a human body. That you can find even in our ancestors. If you go to the Nile Valley right now, a human god or goddess with the head of a baboon or of an ibis. So we saw humans as existing in several forms, either as snakes, chameleons, and different shapes and sizes. And the plants also come through those expressions. So through the medium of the plants, we are able to access all of these portals and networks at once. That is why the plant world is really the World Wide Web. In fact, of almost all the inventions that have occurred, many of the groundbreaking inventions come when people have been through the medium of these plant teachers, which transport them into the dimensions in which the technologies that we are currently using are coming from. Those technologies exist elsewhere. We are now fascinated about artificial intelligence, virtual realities, and augmented realities. But these are things that our ancestors have known already long time ago. Long before the touch screens came, Kantanka had indicated all of these things in some of his work. And a lot of Black people have done these things and demonstrated them long time ago. Radio culture. The sensation of flying. So even witchcraft all witchcraft assassinations, the ability to transport from one dimension to another, the non-locality, it's all done through the medium of the plants. There's a very interesting story about the brother who was traveling to take up a scholarship abroad. And he was told that his grandmother is a witch. And so grandmother shouldn't be made to know about the journey. But if you know how witches operate, they have no borders, no time, space restrictions. So this boy listened to the advice of the whoever told him. And like recently, I saw a video of a guy beating up the mother because the pastor has told him that she's a witch. But the story I'm trying to relate is that, and they said when the guy arrived, he picked the plane, arrived in the West, and he found out in the course of the flight, his shoe had moved and he couldn't find it. He gets up at the airport, started acting like a madman. He was put back in a return flight that he couldn't continue his studies. He gets home and the mother tells him, or the grandmother tells him, this is your shoe. You were trying to run away from me without my knowing. But notice that we don't have borders. What I'm trying to say is that through plants, some people actually say that they can cut the branch of the banana or plantain leaf and use it as an aeroplane and travel to different places. These are stories they tell about the mystical powers of witches. But those are true certain plants that cause these types of behaviors. It is also true for many, many things like executions. If you hemlock in case of Socrates mixed with other plants can easily be used in executing people. Our legal system also had plants as some of the major forms of expression. Plants were used to obtain evidence for certain things. Today, the Calabar bean, for instance, has been very widely researched. In the olden days, when a crime is committed, and it has to be a heinous crime, the elemental behind the plant will be brought forward, and the plant will be used to make a potion. And whoever consumes this potion and is guilty of the offense will suffer the consequence. These were things that you don't need to go to court and be swearing by a book and then lie on it, because it will happen to you when you ingest that. The medium through which that happens is the elemental, which exists in a timeless dimension that sees whatever happens here, so it cannot lie. And therefore, our people use it to adjudicate cases. That means the judge who will be sitting on the case must himself be thoroughly clean and straightforward. And so our legal system, therefore, founded on the plant kingdom, led to, proper justice being meted. And although later on, some of these would be abused because we have judges themselves who are compromised and therefore they cannot administer justice. And even the lie detector that we have in our modern, conceptions of forcing, confessions and things like that are all based on the knowledge that we derive from the plant kingdom. So I would say that what you brought is a very large area of exploration. It's still one of the early stages for me personally, but it's one of the areas that gives us, a lot of confidence that the plant world can really give us solutions. The technology that we are seeing, it's only because a few people are those who are, brave enough to approach these areas to explore. But with the right guidance, I think we could all begin to look into the details of this research. So that would be my response for now, my brother. And you are welcome to probably, add to the discussion and the debate. Was a hand up by MK? Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
you can shoot.
Yes. Once again, I'm back again. Prof, please, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Why is it that sometimes when you are attempting to cut a tree, and maybe you cut the first tree, when you go to the second tree, that tree becomes a little bit hardened to be cut? Is it that the trees, as to say, they communicate? Is it that they send information to the other ones to, get some protecting shields and harden themselves as you are approaching to, so to speak, through them? And then number two, I heard that plants do communicate underward, like the roots. They do communicate each other. That's why when you are digging around them, you see this root will enter that root, that root will enter that root. From all what you have said, it appears to me that the plant kingdom is even more powerful than the human kingdom. But when I think like that, then I ask myself, but the human knowledge and the human mind is so powerful that it is using the plants to enhance the development of the world. So, Prof, which is which? Is it the plant kingdom that is powerful and knowledgeable, or the human race? I give thanks.
Give thanks, my brother. Very, very illuminating thoughts over there. And so, what I will contribute to this reasoning is this. And just to respond briefly to your earlier comment about how to live in symbiosis with the plant world without necessarily burning and cutting, as our brother also contributed to, is one way is through the biogas. In our farms, what we've tried to do is that every single organic matter that we cut and remove from the land, we can put it into a biogas mechanism where we will turn this into fuel for powering our cooking and our factories, and also turning the byproduct into fertilizer. The details of that, how that is made, can easily be discussed later on, but and not the subject of this discussion. But that's a way out. But we also have agroforestry ways of planting and living on the land, for which you can help manage this kind of situation through polycropping and several other organic methods. These are things that we are also pioneering within the Meta Farm systems under the research that we are doing in the Nile Valley Multiversity. So I'm quite happy to share some of the interesting findings we are making in some of these areas. But for now, you can look at this as an area that is has a lot of possibilities, in addition to what our brother Giles Beloved shared earlier. But the cutting of trees and the communication network is very telling, and your point is straight to the heart of the matter, because when I showed the communication link in the plant world through chemical and biological and electrical signals, you will see that this is something that is happening. What we call our Wi-Fi exists in the plant kingdom, actually. Most of these technologies that we are experiencing and using, we don't know where it is actually coming from. But when you drop your brainwave cycles, you can easily tap into some of this intricate network of, neurons, wires, and connections, especially within the root system. And you hit it on the head, because the root system of the plant is an antenna. This antenna is similar to the hair that we have. And that is why in this community, our ancestors who were very highly connected will not touch the hair, because this is an antenna. It's a communication device. This links you, it picks up vibrations and information set. So you imagine your old president TV that was there in the 1980s, 90s, probably, I haven't seen it in a long time, but imagine that kind of TV with the high definition, super plasmic TVs and the current curve versions that we have. The difference in terms of reception and transmission, and it's very vast. Or compare your iPhone 13 Pro or whatever it is, the latest, to the earlier versions of the phones that we had. like your Nokia 3310, for instance. So there is a vast difference between that. So plants actually, through their root network, form an intricate worldwide web where they communicate to each other. So when there is an attack in the ecosystem, they quickly transmit that information, especially in the case of disease spreading. That will help the others within that system to release, toxins or neurons that will form a protective shield. That is biological. You can prove that. You can also say spiritually, this is an ecosystem of plant. I call them plant beings because they exist as we exist. We just see them as being stationary, but it's actually more than that. So that could be one way. And of course, you can explain it. If you are cutting one tree now and you are going on to cut another tree later on in the day, obviously the energy commitment that you have for the second tree could be actually less than what you have right now. So mechanically speaking, that could be a reason. But beyond that, we know the variety of communication links that happen within the plant kingdom. Your second point, sorry, I just talked too much about the others without necessarily focusing on the communication. Are you okay with those two? Yeah.
Please continue, Prof.
No, Prof, it's okay. I mean, this explanation you have given, it's okay because actually dealt with mine. So I'm good. Give thanks.
Okay.
Can I add something?
Sure, please.
Yes. Just to add to what he was saying and what you are saying, I think it helps for us to think of ourselves not as the center of everything. We talk about how smart we are, that we are able to do these things with nature and all that. But the plants are also making us do things. Everything in nature is making us do things to the extent we have to start admitting that even our inventions, the inventions make us make them. Musicians, the songs make us make them. We know they talk about copyright. I made this, I did that. But really, those things exist. And they use us to bring them into manifestation. Yeah, there are ancient knowledges that will say things like, you look at a bird and you look at the tree and you say, oh, they're just doing this based on how we're looking. We're looking at them based on our experience and our worldview. But they are also looking at us. Whatever we're doing, they're doing. As Prof has been saying, they pray, they organize, they interact on levels that most of the time dimensions that most of us, we are very obscure to us based on our conceit, basically. So I think it's important to start understanding that the symbiosis you're talking about should be taken seriously. And we have to sort of get rid of this idea that we are this dominant force in the world. We're doing all these impressive things. Because if you enter their universes and you see the impressive things that they are doing, maybe we'll be humbled. Matter of fact, it's better to admit those things and be humbler. So we decenter our ideas of what a human being is. And I think meaning comes to who we are when we start to see everything in existence. And I've been pushing further, including the things we make as living beings on different dimensions. Yes, that's a little I want to add to this.
Thank you so much, my brother. Couldn't have been said any better. I have Black Militancy's hand up for some time. Just before you come in, and just to reiterate the point, which is to the heart of the second part of his question, was whether we are more intelligent than the plants or vice versa. I think that's one way of looking at it, but really, like he rightly said, we are the same as the plants. And that has been my point from the beginning, that we are the second exponent of the plant kingdom. Biologically, physically, and also, all the chemical processes that we can think about in our science shows that is the case. As I showed in the exchange between carbon dioxide and oxygen, this is something that is just going on. It's a direct one-to-one direct correspondence. So we can't really say that the plants are different than us, or we are different than the plants. We are the plants are us in other ways. Now, Black militancy, please come on with your contribution.
Radio, culture.
Your hand is up, Black militancy. It's muted.
Radio, culture.
You can ask your question. Black. Oh, wow.
Black militancy. If Black not ready, let me go with mine. When it's ready, I'm sure he can come in.
Yes,
at that time.
right.
Yes. So Prof, I'm wondering if you've heard about the concept of permaculture, and it is something that is something that it's also worth our attention. I have a brother who was engaged in that for a little bit, so I got to learn a little bit about that. And they had ways of not just growing food without chemicals and all that, but actually building without digging the earth even, right? So in that style of building, they don't even dig a foundation. They will map out the foundation. They will build solid blocks with straw, huge bales of compacted straw, right? Very compacted straw. And then they'll put spikes in the ground to hold these pieces of straw. They'll build the insulation around it. And if you see some of the designs that they make with it's amazing, So it's that plants hold everything for us, really. Plants are our medicine, they are our food, they are our shelter, they are our everything, if you really come to think of it. So I just wanted to I was wondering if you know anything about that, first of all, and also to throw that in as something that, another dimension of the possibility that plants can take us. It's not just food and all of that. It's actually even fantastic things like building. And these are not buildings like Sebi, some 1 or 2 buildings. These are like buildings that, if you weren't told was made out of bales of straw, they would pass for any other building that you see anywhere else, because of their designs and all that.
No, it's really fascinating to bring this in because one of the works I've been doing the past few weeks has been in the area of alternative construction, using alternative building materials. And it's amazing, staggering what, some of the alternative material in the plant world is bringing us. And that's it right there. If you take some of the northern round houses that they have the roof, the thatch, this thatch is just grass that would have grown. And these days they don't do it. So they just go waste and they burn them. But that is something they harvest and transform into that lovely roof that we can talk about the architecture and the sense of thermoregulation that goes with the whole thing. But back on permaculture, that's a very interesting model. And in line with the idea of whether we can live in partnership with the plants, and not just with the plant, but in consonance with almost all the things that are around us. And I think permaculture is trying to get us to see this area of how to manage our land. And that's why, these are some of the discussions I really was looking at and thinking about when I launched the Journal of Construction and Built Environment, that how do we reconceptualize our spaces that we live? We have to cut down many trees to construct our roads. I saw the UPSA Legon Road, for instance. There was this huge neem tree that was standing there. This tree was like a natural absorber to all the toxicity in the area. One day passing by, it has been pulled down. We could have built around it. Now, there are ways in which you can build your houses with the trees, using them as stakes or poles and pillars without cutting them down.
Yep.
There are houses that are now constructed with the trees and not by cutting them down. So we can live in those spaces. But it's also about adopting our settlement designs, road construction, housing construction, our farming areas. And then within the farms, we can also apportion the different farm areas in such a way that the plants will continue to be in their natural habitat whilst we live. We could, in our vertical farms, we just go a little bit above ground. And then on top there, you can create another ecosystem while the plants are down there and then they are not touched. So permaculture, I visited one of the cannabis farms here in Johannesburg last year and a half. And it was very refreshing what they're doing because vegetables are grown alongside tree plants. And we have also started experimenting some of these in our meta farms where you have medicinal plants coexisting with, food crops and tree plants and etc. in a holistic ecosystem that actually wields and yields a complete, return that will be better than if we were just destroying the system. So, some people will say permaculture is unscientific, but what is really scientific? Because the reliance on the ideas of trying to explain this in the usual sense of ecological science. But our ancestors knew how integrated living and living in such a way that we respect the totality of nature to be. And I think eventually we are all returning there because how far we've come with our evolution has also taught us that we cannot go beyond where we are now if we continue to destroy and to dishonor the very biological basis on which our life hinges on. And I think most of these debates about climate change and the noise about global warming all has to come to that. The relationship between carbon dioxide and oxygen has been an ancient one. That balance has always been maintained. But we human beings have upset the balance. And it is that disequilibrium that we have to pay attention to by looking and refocusing ourselves back on the land and honoring all the kingdoms of nature and the plants being very, very crucial, especially in this talk. So thank you again, Brother Jah Beloved, for that contribution. But permaculture is an alternative way of looking at farming compared to what we have now.
Radio culture.
Yes, give thanks, Prof. I want to pick your thoughts on this. I read a literature that suggests that our body is our body actually came from different parts of planets to come together to form this ecosystem that we call Earth, which comprises of all the living things that talk about plants, animals, and including ourselves. If that is the case, what is your thoughts on that? And then secondly, I agree with you when you say plants or trees are humans and humans are trees. Because when you go to our cemeteries, our body will decay and it will fertile the soil and then it will bring another life, bring another tree out as life. So what's your view on how the body is preserved before burial? Because when you are going to bury body, a lot of chemicals are injected into the body and is buried. Do you hold the view that bodies should be buried without chemicals so that when the body decays, it can fertile the soil for a better growth of the plant that will come out of that fertilization? Thank you, and I give thanks.
Give thanks. All these are very important considerations that we need to give focus to. And normally, we have to just look at things from our experience and how life is given to us. We've got to come to the point to see that we are seeing things through silos and that there's much more to the world that we live in than what has been presented to us by mainstream science. And most of the findings of mainstream science may be useful in several ways. And as students, we have to learn as much as we can from what has been presented. But really, anytime that we are confused about anything, it's always better to go back and check how our ancestors were doing it. Some people have said that some of our ancestors' ways are so horrible and so backward that we shouldn't give thought to that. Maybe that is true for some of their practices, but a lot of their practices are rooted in hardcore science. In fact, modern day science is actually a recapitulation of everything that we have seen and done before. And that's why we always say research and not search, because you are just rediscovering what exists already. So in terms of the use of plants in rituals and ceremonies, that also is a very big area of concern. Plants, if you looked at the practices of the Nile Valley, the embalming of the human body to keep it for an extended period, because our ancestors believed that you don't actually die. It's just the soul moves out of the body and you leave it for some time, enter the underworld, which in itself is an existent world. It is a place of existence. So the pyramids, portals leading to other worlds that we don't know. There is now new science that is coming to show us that the earth that we live in has been hollow all along, and that there are cities beneath us, right, in wherever we find ourselves, and there are people and beings that are living in different portals and holes and caves. In the case of my ancestors, especially Umutelenia, a village in the Upper East region, today we still have the caves where our ancestors believed that they came from under the earth. There is a place in the Akwamu areas where these stories are told of the coming of the ancestors from under the earth. There are also others telling us that our ancestors came from the stars. So the Sirius star system is actually a binary star, Sirius A and Sirius B. Actually, it's much more than that, but that's what our current astronomy can pick up. But our ancestors had mapped the course of that star way back before the development of modern, telescopes and, observatories and viewing devices. How do they do that? Certain types of plants will give us the entrance into those worlds to see that we are actually not just from here, but we exist in several dimensions at once. We exist in several planets at once. So eventually, when Trump was inaugurated, he announced that there will be, ways in which people can now get to see Mars on Mars. But we have been saying that there's life existing on all the planets. The planets that they have been teaching in the textbooks are actually outdated. Actually, most of that textbook material, it's part of the, the limited education that is available within our current paradigm. But we know that there are lots of planets and other worlds in which we ourselves have existence and participation. But most of that reality is not readily available. Even here right now, as we sit, if you look at the map of the world, as they show us, they don't show Antarctica, but that's a whole continent that is not taught even in the schools. So how much don't we know about the very world that we claim that we live in? And I think that is where the plant world begins to teach us, because you will see the other worlds. And those questions that we are trying to answer right now may all become obvious for us when we understand how this plant world works. Because some of the plants exist in other worlds for which we also have participation, but currently we don't know. So that would be my short response for now. But other than that, in terms of the preservation, I think we have also deviated very, very markedly, because when you go to the embalming rooms, they use several plants to keep the body in that motion for a long time, because our ancestors believed that after a certain period of time in the underworld, you come back and you take the same body. This same notion is now coming back with all the artificial intelligence and the robotics that is going on, that we can actually maintain longevity and keep life forever and ever. So in the case of our ancestors, there wasn't death. What we call death was just like a sleep of the body. So you sleep and then you enter into the underworld. Do whatever you want there. The underworld is also a world like here. There is commerce there. There are bankers. There are architects. There are economists, professors, all kinds of traders and marketers, inventors, creative people. This is a real world for other people. So they put the body down, just like we do at night. After this, we all go to bed. When you go to bed and the physical body is lying down, what happens in the other dimensions? You are neither woman nor man. You are neither, black nor white. This is a real thing because you are in an endless stream of consciousness and creativity where everything that you want to model. So the first point is to observe this physical world and see what you want to create. And when our brother said, this comes by knowing yourself, who you are and what you want. So your thoughts, by going to bed, therefore, you fall into that other realm and that other world, which, you naturally are unaware of. You wake up in the morning and back into the same cycle. But again, most of the plants are able to show us that world live, like we are watching TV. So on your mind screen, as a TV screen, certain types of plants will stimulate certain neuronal pathways and, instigate certain types of, recurrence and occurrences that will set you to those kind of experiences. So yes, I do know and I am aware that there are existences other than this, and we ourselves do not exist in just this earth here. This is a very limited place. If you just say that your existence is in Ghana, and that is a very limited place, and it is only in Accra, which is another limited place, or it's in Nabrungu, which is another limited place. That kind of limitation really sets us in that small world that we live. But in the multidimensional world, we exist at once in different locations. And now with technology, we can bilocate. We can have, we can all meet like this. There are actually other beings that are listening to us right now, but we cannot see them, we cannot observe them, but they are participating in this whole creation that we are all doing. And that also gives us to another dimension altogether in what we are doing. Technology has helped us. Some sitting in the United States, some sitting in Ghana, in South Africa, in Accra, Kumasi, and other places, Techiman. And we are all participating in this creation through the medium of technology. But plants can also get us into that same, if we are all wired in the same sense as we are wired as members and people of the Rastafari community, united by the great mystery of our ancestors to share in this platform, then we create that reality. And time doesn't exist here. So those are some of the interesting things that are coming up that our technology will force us finally to admit the existence of the spiritual world as a valid expression of the physical, and the physical world as a valid effect of the spiritual. So both the unseen and the seen dimensions are therefore merged, and then we begin to play the game of life as it really should be played. That we are the creators, the architects, the directors of the movie of life that we are here to create. So when you get into this knowledge, what will you do with it? And that's really the the question that I pose back to the entire community. What will you do with such knowledge when you suddenly just come across it and it hits on you? Wow. And this is the beauty of what we have done and given to ourselves at this stage of our lives on the planet. Because from this period onwards, most of the beloved energies that are coming to us are pointing us to look deeply into some of the things, the obvious solutions to our health crisis, to our economic mismanagement and poverty, to all the hardship created by underdevelopment, will begin to make inroads. And the new technologies for us to do that are also in existence. And I'm pointing you back to the plant kingdom. Give thanks.
Thank you so much, Prof. I'm grateful.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Prof. Please, do we have any other comments, question?
Radio, culture.
Black militancy. Yeah, Black militancy said he wanted to find out about the implication of the effect of weedicide on the ecosystem. And he's finding it difficult to muting his setting up his microphone. So he said he wanted to find out the effect of weedicide on the ecosystem.
Right. Thank you very much for that. This is a very large topic that can take us several hours to explain. But briefly, is that some of the compounds that are brought together to make those weedicides come through what they call the Haber-Bosch process. Now, this is a scientific process of actually converting nitrogen, which is a very, very, common air in our atmosphere. In fact, when you look at the composition of gases in our atmosphere, this is one of the most commonest gas. So there's no problem with natural nitrogen in the atmosphere. The problem comes when we, in our little understanding of the process involved, try to synthesize it in the lab. And that synthesis has created large amounts of this nitrogen ammonia reaction with hydrogen that produces a lot of the compounds that are not used in the agricultural sector. Now, when you do that, if you want to increase food production, you can actually increase these things, the production of these things in the lab, like the nitrogen fertilizers in large quantities. And for commercial purposes, this is a good thing. So they say that the world has a hunger problem, so we need to double food production or probably up it. We don't believe that the world has a food problem. The world actually has a waste problem because of almost all the food that is produced, 40% of it goes waste. So it is not a problem of food production. We really should be consuming and using more of the food that we produce than letting it go waste. So the argument for the chemical fertilizers is just a commercial motive. So when the scientists discovered that you can actually synthesize nitrogen through that Haber-Bosch process, they won the Nobel Prize. It launched the so-called Green Revolution that led to the production of massive amounts of chemicals for plant nutrition. But also at the same time, there's other chemicals that are used to kill, weeds. And some of these, like the compounds we now use to treat cancer, cannot discriminate between healthy cells and malignant cells. So some of the weedicides cannot distinguish between, actual plants that are beneficial and those that are not. So they kill a large number of plants within the ecosystem. And in fact, the animal and microbial life that is responsible for these plants to survive are also murdered. And then you need all kinds of other, chemicals to then put that nutrition back. So you have to disrupt the cycle of nature in order to put those compounds back. And so the seeds that are also being sown also have their DNA, RNA factors altered so that when they go into the soil, they will crave for you to put that chemical for them to survive. So the entire process is that the food we are now producing has less vitality. It's more poisonous and polluted. And there are now studies that are showing the effects and concentration of those chemicals because whatever you eat becomes your body. So you are what you eat. So if you're eating large amounts of food that don't have large amounts of organic life in it, it also means that our vitality, and that is what is also linked. So the food network is linked to the health and wellness of the population. There are quite a number of studies that have shown how what is coming out of the food chain, either in terms of meat or in terms of the plants that we eat are all contributing to the numerous cancers and other kinds of diseases that humanity then have to live with. Now, another aspect of this is that most of the farmers that have used these chemicals after retirement from farming have got all kinds of disease conditions that are inexplicable from the medical textbooks and the existing medical traditions. So in the US and in Canada, for instance, the chemical called paraquat, most farmers have realized after almost retirement from farming that they have an Alzheimer's and dementias that are linked to this plant. And there are all kinds of disease conditions that the pharmaceutical cartel that is running this network has been taken to court. But of course, you know that it's not very easy to win these battles with the kind of bottom lines that the pharmaceutical firms make from the sale of these chemicals. But the research is out there, and it has demonstrated the long-term effect of turning rich and very vibrant land into deserts have been shown with some of the chemicals. So long-term, the effect of the chemicals is really very deleterious to the environment, and it is more dangerous to our health and existence. So back to the discussion today, if we say that the plant world is us, and we are the plant world, and we are ready to use lots of chemicals to disorganize the plant kingdom, then by implication, we are disorganizing our own system. So the psychological disequilibrium that we find ourselves in is also a function of the kinds of toxicity that we have introduced into the food chain through the chemicals that we use in agriculture. So we insist within the Nile Valley multiversity system and our meta farming approach that all farming has to be organic. And we have actually more cheaper, easier, better, and more efficient and sustainable ways of farming. Radio culture to vermiculture, vermicomposting. It's another way of looking at it. Mulching, shifting cultivation has been used for a long time. Crop rotation and several other ways in which we can get back to just living naturally. Our brother mentioned a very important point that, because it is easy for us to just burn and to just destroy, we are taking the simplest route of just going to get a chemical to come and kill the weeds. But the communal spirit of farming and getting the weeds up so that they will die and decompose and turn back into the organic matter that support the plant growth is so difficult for us these days that we just want the cheapest means. The cheapest means is also what is sending us to our graves quite quickly. And it's increasing our health bills, and it's making us more disrupted so that we don't see the game that is going on. But we must open our eyes to see the game. If we really want to participate in it, we must be the player and be able to watch the player play at the same time. I think bridging these gaps as the spectator and the player at the same time is one of the most difficult lessons that we have to master in this very moment. I give thanks.
Thank you very much, Prof. Imhotep. We'll still ask if anybody has a question, comment. Radio culture. Seen you around. Black gold. You've heard a lot. Is there anything you'd like to seek clarification on? Give thanks.
Give thanks. I'm good to go.
President Kex, Biomineral. Please, is there any question you want to ask? So, it seems there are no more comments or questions. At this stage, I'll invite Prof. Imhotep to give us his closing remarks for tonight's reasoning. Give thanks.
Blessings and thanks to all the beings that joined us in this great transmission, to all the plants and the plant beings, and to all you brothers and sisters, the entire Rastafari community. This is the message of the plants, that we are all one people. We call them, some of them, the standing people, and some of them are creepy crawlers. They exist in several forms and varieties. They exist in different dimensions and worlds. Their wisdom is here to assist us in our own evolution. Plant world contain all the mystery, magic, and the miracles that are here for us. Let's embrace the message of the plants of mutual coexistence, of love and understanding, so that our world can enlarge and our knowledge can expand beyond the current boundaries. This is a true message from all our ancestors, past, present, and future, and it's to all of you listening online, offline, on world, off world. We give thanks in the name of the great Haile Selassie and all our great ancestors, our great mothers, Kadwa, Vanigaba, Kotoba, and all the Kenanes. Thank you very much, my brother. I give thanks to all of you for this opportunity, and hopefully we shall link up again in another reasoning. So for me, it's a great blessing and a pleasure to be with you. Give thanks.
Thank you very much, Prof. We appreciate the wisdom shared tonight. Please, I wanted to ask personally, but I'm sure the answer will favor most of our brothers who may come around the side. Please, can you help us with direction to your place in Techiman? Your center in Techiman.
So right now I am not there. So when I come, I will ask my younger brother to direct you, because I don't know the street names and all of that. But it's in Mesidine, so if you live in Techiman, you should be able to locate us. But I'll get him to give you the exact GPS direction on there.
Thank you very much, Prof.
And Prof, I will be calling you. I'll be calling you to talk to you about the possibility of hosting you on Radio Culture, iCulture TV, and all of that. So please expect my call.
I give thanks, my brother. I look up for that.
Yes, we give thanks very much to Prof for the wisdom shared. We give thanks to all brethren for your presence. We'll call it a night. We give thanks to our listeners on Radio Culture. The lecture will be uploaded on our YouTube channel by RCG. He will share the link for us to also to be able to revisit the lecture and to appreciate the wisdom shared. So thank you very much. Once blessings, give thanks for your presence. Rastafari.
Rastafari.
Recording stopped.
Rastafari.
And they sell news in a proxy war.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for tuning in to this edition of the bi-weekly lecture from the Rastafari Council of Ghana. Today's lecture was on the topic, the mystery, magic, and let me read that again. I don't want to mix it up.
Humble yourself, you're highly programmed.
The mystery, magic, and miracle of the plant people. Thank you very much for tuning in today. This is Radio Culture. My name is your beloved. I am out like a light. I'll see you in 2 weeks' time for the same lecture with another topic and another speaker. One love. Goodbye.
Simple answer, skill, technique, inadequate honesty. Machine learning out the human efficiency to explain ourselves. They can hear, can they listen, and elaborate, can they feed it? They sell news in a proxy war.